Welcome back to the Trackstar Podcast, a conversation about music and culture centered around a playlist I've specifically created for our guests. This week, we're talking to Justin Peck, the youngest ever choreographer in residence for the New York City Ballet. He's also a 3-time Tony Award winner.
Groundbreaking orchestral work. I think he's like the king of melody.
How does a ballet come to be?
The best setup for success is to make sure it comes from like deep down within.
In this episode, Justin's going to explain how choreography actually gets written and what happens when choreography moves from the stage to the screen.
Sometimes I'll be working for like 4 hours straight, and then we get to the end of the rehearsal and I'm like, okay, let's run it. And it's like 20 seconds long. You're like, wow. I actually got to engage with a little known director named Spielberg, up and comer.
We'll also hear from FK Twigs, an artist that Justin is a huge fan of. I am too, about the creative direction behind her Grammy award-winning album, Eusexua.
I had a crumping in slow motion. So it's like this really raw expression.
Do you think about the whole thing when you're making music?
Often I get a visual straight away.
I've learned a lot about music making this show, but choreography is an area we have yet to tap into. I'm excited for you to hear this one. Roll the intro.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Check, check.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Trackstar, let's go.
I wish the world could be in these headphones right now.
I'm on the show. Have fun.
We're off to a very hot start here. Before we start the music, just introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Justin Peck, and I'm the resident choreographer here at New York City Ballet.
Okay, this is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Where are we standing right now?
This is the main stage of our theater here at Lincoln Center, and it's about 2,600 seats. As you can see, it's 4 tiers, 4 rings, an orchestra level, and our orchestra pit, and we're standing right on the stage where the ballet happens, the dancing happens.
Right behind the cameras, we're looking at a backdrop. And it looks somewhat familiar to me. It looks like it could be a scene from The Nutcracker.
This is true. This is the Nutcracker set, which kind of lives here for 6 to 7 weeks as the company performs The Nutcracker through, I think, a few days past New Year's Eve, actually. So it's kind of our bread and butter. It's,
you just went to see it.
I did. I went to see it last night. I brought my daughter for the first time, brought our family, and like half of her Montessori school class.
Very
so
cool.
It was like a very lively evening at the ballet. Yeah.
Is the Nutcracker like to me? It feels like one of the greatest entry points into ballet for young people, but just for everyone. Is that valid to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think like half of the professional dancers you ask, they'll probably say like, my first experience was coming to see the Nutcracker when I was a kid. It's such a holiday tradition, especially in this country. It's performed not just here, but multiple productions in New York City and then all over the country. Every major city probably has a production of the Nutcracker. So it's a huge entry point for any wide-eyed kid who aspires to dance.
And what about you when you were a kid?
It wasn't the Nutcracker for me. It wasn't the Nutcracker. I was in productions when I was growing up a little bit, but I was always sort of skeptical of it. And, for me, I started dancing. I actually started as a tap dancer. So I started more in like a theater setting, doing community theater, youth theater, regional theater, and tap dancing, and doing like a lot of like theater dance, and then found ballet through other productions and really like through a love of music, actually. So, yeah.
I want to learn throughout this conversation about the interconnection between music and dance. Is there dance without music? Is it possible?
Yes.
Okay.
There can be
That's
dance
important.
without music. they can be totally separate entities that then get slapped together. The choreographer who was the most well-known for doing that was Merce Cunningham, and he would take a cast of dancers in a room and create a whole spatial world, and then he would commission a composer. He often worked with John Cage, and the composer would write music separately, and then they would bring those two experiences together, usually at the dress rehearsal going into the performances. So the dancers had no idea what would be performed sonically and vice versa. So that was like one very well-known approach. At New York City Ballet, it's really known for presenting work that's about the interrelation between music and movement. Sometimes that involves storytelling, and sometimes that's done in a very like abstract way. So there's a lot of collaborations between choreographers and composers, and the most iconic is George Balanchine, who's the founding choreographer of New York City Ballet, and Igor Stravinsky. And they were colleagues and really close friends, and they developed and created several incredible ballets together. And yeah, I mean, then it's everything from choreographing a full-length story ballet production of A Midsummer Night's Dream to a ballet that was a collaboration between Stravinsky and Balanchine called Agon, which is totally stripped down of all story, all design. They're in like practice clothes. It's all meant to be like distilled down to music and movement and how those two things interrelate.
You want to hear some songs?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready.
Here you go.
Swan Lake.
Correct.
Tchaikovsky. That is probably the most iconic story ballet. I mean, I feel like any person you stop on the street and ask them what's a story ballet, they're going to tell you Swan Lake. There's been movies made about it. There's been so many different productions created for Swan Lake, and the score is one of the greatest. Tchaikovsky, he was known for being able to pen a lot of narrative ballets. He also did Sleeping Beauty. He's written all kinds of symphonies and concert music as well. And I think he's like the king of melody. Like he's sort of like a pop, like a pop music writer, like disguised as a classical composer. I think he's like the most melodic, which I always appreciated about him, because you can like the melodies get stuck in your head. Like you can leave sort of like singing the song, so to speak.
Is that useful when you're working on a dance piece? So, like having a strong melody that you can connect to and relate to? Is it like imprinting on the dance in some way, or on the people watching it?
Yeah. I think like melody is one of those things that humans can latch onto and connect to, and it's why pop music is such a ubiquitous thing and such a major cultural thing in the mainstream. And so I think that's part of why those story ballets are so successful, is because people really latch onto those melodies, and they have certain characters about them. You know, you feel the character of the swan through what Tchaikovsky writes in the melody.
Okay, I want to start with like an easy one. I want to get
I love that. Point. I love that. 2 notes, and I know what it is. It's great.
Okay, what about this one? One of the things about these songs is...
Oh, yeah. Okay, we got this. This is Rite of Spring.
Yep. There's lots of different versions of all these songs, depending on who the orchestra is and where it came from.
Totally. Rite of Spring, groundbreaking orchestral work. Was written as a ballet in kind of the Ballet Russe days, and was this piece of music that actually like provoked riots. People were so like outraged by the sound of this music, and now we listen to it and it's like become one of the most defining pieces of music in music history, and it's super studied. It's a very intimidating piece of music. There's a great production of The Rite of Spring that was created by Pina Bausch, actually. They lay out a whole stage full of dirt, like from the earth, and it's all with the dancers barefoot performing on this like amazing soil. It's really moving. We don't have a Rite of Spring here at New York City Ballet, but I feel like someone's got to do one of these days. I don't know. It's an intimidating piece. Don't look at me.
We just heard Justin say that the Rite of Spring caused riots when it first premiered. That isn't exactly true, but the story around the premiere is very interesting. Let's go to the studio for a short essay on what happened when this controversial ballet first came out. We tend to think of classical music as universally respected and ballet as polite and inoffensive. But the music we view as safe today often didn't arrive that way. Many classics were once risks that made people uncomfortable. This is a story about a composer helping invent what we now call modern music, and the first time audiences heard it, they were genuinely insulted. It's Paris, May 29th, 1930. The Champs-Élysées was barely 8 weeks old, new enough to still smell like fresh plaster. Ballet Rouge was premiering a new work by Igor Stravinsky. Stravinsky was already internationally known after the success of The Firebird, which had premiered in Paris 3 years earlier. That ballet had brought him sudden fame and established expectations for another brilliant Russian spectacle. Instead, the orchestra opened with a bassoon line perched in an unusually high register, a sound that felt like the wrong instrument in the wrong century. And when the full ensemble entered, numerous spectators experienced the rhythm as disorienting and difficult to follow. Across reviews, writers returned repeatedly to the same complaint. The score's rhythms felt abrasive and deliberately obstructive rather than flowing in familiar patterns. Vaslav Nijinsky answered that sound with choreography that rejected Parisian ballet habits. Familiar ballet language of elegant turns and weightless leaps disappeared, replaced by stomping steps, bent waists, and crouching torsos. Accounts of the original staging emphasized turned-in positions, heavy grounded movement, and groups crossing the stage laterally instead of orbiting a principal star. His approach deeply alienated traditionalist critics. In Le Temps, Pierre Lalo, son of composer Edward Lalo, wrote that the production lacked the traditional qualities of grace, elegance, lightness, nobility, eloquence, and expression, condemning the Rite of Spring as ugly, and Nijinsky's staging as not dancing at all. Nicholas Roerich's visual design reinforced that break with tradition. Surviving costumes from 1913 were made from fine wool flannelite, often dyed red or left off-white, reflecting rustic Slavic materials rather than the silk and satin associated with imperial ballet. Design sketches showing long tunics and dresses modeled on traditional rubka and paneva garments with braided wigs and fur-trimmed hats that evoked a pagan, pre-Christian world. The story itself offered no romance to soften the image either. A pagan tribe selects a girl who must dance herself to death to restore spring. To many in the hall, the spectacle appeared like a deliberate affront to accepted taste. Crowd noise began early and escalated as the ballet continued, taking the form of boos, hisses, laughter, and jeers. Contemporary observers noted that disruptions began almost immediately, and journalist Gaston de Pulowski reported that the noise was so great that it was only by cupping our ears that we could painfully grasp an approximate idea of this new work. In his own autobiography, Stravinsky recalled that the orchestral introduction was greeted with mocking laughter, which so dismayed him that he left his seat and watched from the wings as the disturbance grew into a terrific uproar. Some later memoirs portrayed the premiere as violent, but contemporary accounts describe an overwhelmingly vocal clash, boos, counter cheers, and arguments spilling into the corridors rather than a riot in the aisles. Historians generally agree that the premiere was seriously disrupted and that the audience divided into opposing camps while the performance continued. Part of the reaction lived in the body before it reached the intellect. Research on rhythm perception shows that listeners build unconscious predictions about where the next beat will fall. When those predictions are violated, listeners often report heightened tension and sharpened attention. Stravinsky's score withheld the downbeat many expected, while Nijinsky asked dancers to look heavy instead of weightless, so eye and ear experienced the same instability. Paris supplied the rest of the context. The Dreyfus Affair, an explosive political crisis from 1894 to 1906 over the false conviction of a Jewish army officer, had split France into overlapping camps. Nationalists, often Catholic traditionalists on one side, and secular Republicans and socialists on the other. Those divisions lingered in the culture, shaping how Parisians argued about art, nation, and modernity. The Ballet Russe arrived as a glamorous foreign company at a moment when questions of identity and belonging were already charged, and audiences carried firm expectations about what a Russian ballet was supposed to be. The scandal cooled relatively quickly as Stravinsky's work entered the repertoire and began to be heard more often in concert settings. Nijinsky's original choreography was performed only 8 times before disappearing from the stage. Later revivals used new choreographies, including a 1920 version by Leonard Massin for the Ballet Russe. For decades, audiences knew the ballet through those later interpretations. It wasn't until 1987 that the Joffrey Ballet reconstructed Nijinsky's staging in Los Angeles from prompt books, photographs, and eyewitness testimonies. Moments like this echo through time. When Bob Dylan played an electric set at the Newport Folk Festival in July 1965, many listeners experienced it as a betrayal of a shared code. Miles Davis's amplified ensembles provoked similar arguments about what counted as authentic jazz. Punk would make the same move by treating roughness as a principle instead of a mistake. The arguments around these shows echo the questions Paris heard in 1913 about who the music belonged to and what it was allowed to be. Today, the Rite of Spring is no longer a scandal, but a landmark of modernism. But still, every new production must decide how much of 1913 to keep alive and how much to leave behind. And each audience still confronts a score that refuses to make itself comfortable. How does a ballet come to be here?
Ooh, okay.
There's probably a few different ways, but
definitely. I mean, a ballet here, for the most part, I would say, starts with the music, because New York City Ballet is so puts such high value on music inspiring movement and a kind of like world you can create based off of that foundation. So I would say usually it starts with choosing a piece of music to work with, either something that's existed sometimes for a long time, sometimes for a short amount of time, or commissioning a composer to write a piece of music. So sometimes it starts with like, speaking as a choreographer, I'm really interested in the voice of this certain composer or songwriter or whatever that is, and let me start a conversation with them to see if they want to collaborate on making something.
You get to do that.
Yes. It is. I mean, I'm super lucky. I have a residency here at New York City Ballet, and I usually create like 1 or 2 new dances a year for the company. And with each commission, I try to give myself certain parameters, certain rules that'll help kind of shape the process, and how many dancers we're going to have in the cast, and who's going to write the music, or what music am I going to use, and who's going to design the scenery, and do I ask this fashion designer to design the costumes for the piece. And it's actually, what I love about it is the ballet is this amazing meeting point for different artistic mediums to come together to create a collective, cohesive experience for an audience. So I have this privilege to invite in artists of all different crafts and practices to participate in that process. So it's very special and not something I take for granted.
Do you have a music discovery ritual that you go through, or are there times are you like riding the subway or walking around New York, like trying to discover new music, to think about people that you might want to work with here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very personal journey, I will say. So it's and I think that's the best setup for success, is to make sure it comes from like that place deep down within. And so that involves listening to a lot of music. Early on in my career, I would create these like really extensive playlists of music, of pieces that I wanted to one day choreograph. And like I've slowly sort of plucked those out at the right time and choreographed them. Or, as I sort of built my career, it led me to a point where I had more of a platform to initiate these conversations with music makers of today who I feel like have relevance and who inspire me personally. So it's really cool to get to engage with them in that way.
This might sound like a dumb question, but do you ever put headphones on and close your eyes and imagine a dance? Is that how it works?
All the time. Yeah. It is a practice of, you can't rush through it. It's like you have to sit and be with the music and listen to it in real time and do that on repeat. Honestly, it's a very time-consuming process. Sometimes listening to a piece of music thousands and thousands of times, and then responding to that, a structure starts to take shape, or an idea starts to take shape, and there's a lot of, for me in my process, there's a lot of like writing out notes and metaphors and imagery, and creating these kind of like charts to help map my way through the dance that I'm going to create.
It's, for someone like me, it's like an abstract thing to wrap your head around. Like writing a dance. Like you can write a piece of music. I mean, there's written music, which if you understand how to read music, you understand how to write. But that doesn't exist with dance in the same way.
Not in the same way. It's not this like unified way of recording dance. I mean, it's because it exists in time and space, and it's so much about the physicality of the human body. Yeah. It's really hard to just like write down. So there is this leap of faith that happens even as I'm preparing a new dance. It's like I always have these like nerves about, okay, I'm going to have to then throw everything to the wind and walk into the studio and work with dancers and see how they respond to ideas that I present to them, and how they maybe like take a movement phrase and they kind of tweak it and it becomes their own, and they pass it back to me, and there's that kind of exchange. And it's honestly, though, it's like the number one question I get is, how do you make a dance? And it's one of the hardest things to explain, because I'm still trying to understand it. And there's so many steps to how that works. And also I'll say that like it's kind of like directors who make films. Like there's no like one way to do it. Yeah. Everyone sort of has their own process, and a lot of it is really self-found or self-taught. And so the way that I make a dance is very different from another person coming in to create a dance. Yeah.
And you have to collaborate so closely with every single person.
Yeah.
Like if there's a movie and there's a script, the actor can read it, you can read it, but you have to sort of guide them in some way, and they're going to bring their own ideas to the table. You know what you want the movement to be, but it's not until you're in the rehearsal room with a dancer where you basically explain it that actually what they just did, they've added another element to it. They've brought something different.
I would say it's very similar to like a writer-director. Like it's the movement is the script. So it's like I come in with ideas of like little writings of choreography, and then I'm like, what do you think of this? And in the case of a film, the actor might read that and be like, this doesn't really suit my character, or like what's the subtext of this, or what's the motivation here, and whatever. And so it evolves through a process. And I think with creating a dance, it's like I come in and I'm like, this is the piece of choreography, and they're like, okay, this feels a little weird on my body, and what is this trying to say? And then I'll try and sort of ignite their imagination to bring more depth to the movement and more of their selves to it. And so it's like it's a very long process, slow process. Like sometimes I'll be working for like 4 hours straight with 2 dancers, and then we get to the end of the rehearsal and I'm like, okay, let's run it. And it's like 20 seconds long. And you're like, wow, we spent 4 hours and we have 20 seconds to show. And it just you run it and you're like, it can't be that short, right? Yeah. But it is it's a very drawn out process. And a process that also involves like editing. And right now I'm working on a new dance for New York City Ballet, and I'm just at the point where I'm getting to the first draft or first pass of the full dance. Yeah. And so once I get to that point, I'll step away from it and I'll study it. Once I can come at it with fresh eyes, and we'll go back into the studio and go through like an editing process to continue to refine things or scrap things, try new things.
Do you film it? Yes. And like watch back the tape? Because otherwise you're just having people, okay, go.
Yeah, yeah. So that can be a very useful tool. And I tend to film pretty much every day. So, and then I can take that footage with me and study it in like very closely in detail, sometimes in slow motion, sometimes like one little sliver of it on, over and over again to try and see like how to refine that moment. And I'll make copious notes and then come back in the next day and apply the revisions to it. Yeah.
You want to hear another song?
Let's do it. Yeah. Yep. West Side Story.
Classic.
Amazing.
And here.
Amazing.
In this neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. Made here, right on this soil. This was the neighborhood. I was torn down to create Lincoln Center. So there's this like meta thing about it. The creator of West Side Story was Jerome Robbins, who was a director and a choreographer, and he had his own residency here at this company and with this in this theater. Huge inspiration for me. Someone who built a lot of stories and shows and ballets from the ground up, both for the ballet and for theater and for film, with something like West Side Story. And West Side Story, I think, is like the quintessential American musical, and how it blends all the forms. It has like this tremendous backbone of dance that runs through it. It's kind of a wild idea that he had. Like if someone pitched that today where they were like, I'm gonna like make this show about like 2 gangs fighting, but they're gonna like dance fight, I think like that just no one would go for it. But he was he sort of had a vision for how to do it. And obviously it became this like timeless, just incredible piece of work that he made. And then I actually got to engage with this material with a little-known director named Steven Spielberg, up-and-comer. But he actually, this is his favorite musical, and he always wanted to make a musical. Yeah. And so he approached this material, and he wanted to reimagine it, and he worked with the screenwriter and playwright Tony Kushner, and they developed a whole script that had so much depth to it. And then thereafter, they reached out to me and invited me into that process, and I got to choreograph the film that Spielberg made, and it was just like the most incredible adventure of my life.
When you're watching dance from somewhere in this audience here, you have a very specific perspective. The stage isn't moving. Yeah. It's just right here, right? It's flat. Whereas with something like the movie, the camera movement is very dynamic in that film. How do you think about those two things differently? The
Yeah.
audience who's watching a dance in the movie theater versus the audience here when the stage isn't moving.
Yeah, it's such a great observation. It's like parameters, right? It's here. It's a box. It's like the dance.
Camera is also a dancer.
Right. So exactly. It like opens up the for the stage. It's a box. When you create anything for film, nothing is limited to a specific place. It can be set anywhere. The camera motion also activates the movement. Even in the case of West Side Story, there were moments where they were like, we can build a set to whatever you want it to be, which was also just like, I almost wanted there to be more limitations, because it's like, if you have any possibility, you like don't really know where to start.
Yeah.
That was the case of the version of Cool that we did in the film. They built out this whole dilapidated ferry pier. And they were like, any obstacles you want, just let us know and we'll build it into the set. And if you go back and you watch that number, there's all these moments where they're jumping over holes in the pier, they're swinging on bars, they're like running up the sides of the, like the walls. And that really came from like, okay, like, how do we go from infinite possibilities to like a real staging that was in close collaboration with Steven Spielberg to shape. And there was we spent so much time going back and forth on that number and how to shoot it and where to put the camera and just the full arc of that dance and what it was saying. Yeah, it was, and to just zoom out a little bit, it was like a 79-day shoot, and we rehearsed for like 4 or 5 months before and spent a couple of years dreaming it up. So it was a very long process and very thorough, and a huge masterclass in filmmaking too.
You're on set while that's happening too, and adding some direction, or is that pretty much locked before?
I'm on set, sitting right next to Steven every day of the shoot, every day of rehearsal, and getting to collaborate with him. Musical theater, whether it's for the stage or for film, is a very collaborative medium, and so and Steven was a very generous collaborator. He welcomed that spirit of collaboration into his process and guided us all, and was very open about also just like sharing his approach to filmmaking. So I remember like dear diary, like writing a lot of notes, like daily notes, like these are the bullet points of the takeaway from today, but also like totally exhausted at the end of like these long shoot days, coming home. Yeah.
It's so good. Okay, what about this?
It's Phillip Glass. Let me see if I can name this. Is this one of the etudes?
Opening, it's called.
Opening.
It's let's see what it's.
What album is that on?
Glassworks.
So Phillip Glass is another composer who's collaborated a whole lot with choreographers. I've choreographed a few of his compositions. I feel like the most known, or at least one of the best known dance collaborations he did was called In the Upper Room with a choreographer named Twyla Tharp. His sound is like, I feel like if anyone hears Phillip Glass, they like know, right? It's like he's really, he's kind of the king of creating a style through repetition, right? It's like he's just like, this is what my sound is, and there's little variations on it, but it's almost like a meditation that he's created through his process of composing. And I love that about his music. And he's also, he's scored films, he's written operas, he's composed for dance, he's written symphonies, he's just kind of done everything. So, he's a legend.
How do you think about, as a choreographer, that repetition with slight variation?
Well, there's a quote actually by Bob Fosse where I don't want to butcher it, but I could like paraphrase it, where he says that people say that I have a style, but I guess if I repeat things enough, it starts to become a style. So I do think that there's this kind of like self-imposed taste where you're like, oh, I like this little melodic progression, or I like this kind of movement step. Mm-hmm. And that starts to fold in again and again into one's work. And that helps to eventually become the style of a maker, whether it's for music or for dance. And there's different degrees of that. I mean, some people are highly repetitive. Some people try not to repeat at all. But I think if you look at any choreographer, whether it's George Balanchine or Bob Fosse or Alexei Ratmansky, you start to like feel those repetitions, and there's kind of like a comfort in what that is. And I think that goes for like a lot of composers, a lot of songwriters. They're often like searching for a certain kind of sound, and you feel them reaching for that through the music that they write again and again.
I fell in love again.
Oh, I had a feeling I would get this one.
All things go. Drove to Chicago.
Oh, yes. Sufjan, Chicago, I guess his most well-known song. Chicago, which is this like incredible arrangement of strings and guitar and drums and just all kinds of instruments. And it's very like coming of age, kind of leaving your hometown and in pursuit of an adventure or a next chapter of what's out there. And that takes shape, I guess, in the city of Chicago and ultimately the city of New York. And that album is an album that is very dear to my heart. And I first heard it when I was, it must have been 16 or 17. And that was when I thought like, oh, this guy could really like write something interesting for dance.
Yeah.
And also he's a great storyteller. And then I had the good fortune of meeting him right around the time when I was offered my first commission for New York City Ballet. And somehow he said yes to participating in this. And we've gone on to collaborate 6 or 7 times on different projects. And but I created a whole stage Broadway musical inspired by his album Illinois, that's the title track. Chicago is like kind of like the main track on that album. It's an album that just resonates with a whole generation of people, and certainly did for me. And I wanted to create an experience that if the album is like an X and a Y axis, how could we expand it on the Z axis and make it kinetic and physicalized and visual? And also, this was more of a question at the time, but I was like, is there a story in here that feels like has a full arc that we can tell? And I want to say it probably took me like 8 years to convince Sufjan to let me do it. And I was like persistent. I think I just wore him down. Like, I think I just like kept asking. And finally he was like, all right, I could tell you really want to do this. You have my blessing. And so I collaborated with a playwright named Jackie Sibley's-Drury, and we built this show. It's kind of like the seed of an idea that became a fully realized production. Yeah.
When you're just listening to music in your daily life, like any song, are you thinking about dance? Are you always thinking about dance, or is there a lot of times when you're not? You're just listening to the music?
I think both. Yeah. I think it's a good kind of litmus test to see if something is good for dance, because it'll bubble up if it's there. And so I feel like now more than ever, I don't try to force it, and I'll find certain music that I'm like, oh, I'll listen to like an FKA Twigs song and I'm like, she should write for dance, or something like that. So, yeah.
She used to be a dancer.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's
Maybe
partially
that's
why. Yeah. I mean, it's probably ingrained in her. And she's also, she has this like kind of almost operatic sweep to her vocals. Yeah. And like, I just like in terms of what her range is like and her facility is like. And so she's a very interesting artist.
How do we get her here?
Put it out into the universe. We'll see. Yeah.
Lucky enough, we got the chance to speak with FKA Twigs in the past year, and one of my favorite things about that conversation was hearing her talk about the choreography, the creative direction, and the world building behind not only her songs, but her entire albums. Check this out. We saw you in Barcelona this summer, and that show, like your fucking live show is amazing.
Thank you.
It's just like, how do you think about setting a performance on stage, like before, like preparing and how you're gonna, like in terms of the lights, the stage design, how you're gonna perform, how the dancing combines with the music and singing, all that stuff? And how long does that take you?
I think now, because I've been doing this for a while, I feel really grateful to have quite a variety of music. So I feel like each time I release a record, it's kind of filling out a different part of my personality. So Eusexia was the first time that I felt that my show felt very well-rounded, because there's kind of this like experimental, spiritual sensuality in me, but then there's also this really playful kind of alien pop-esque personality, and then there's kind of really sad kind of sonic treachery, like in Melissa and in Magdalene, there's this darkness. And so now it's really fun creating my live shows because I can take myself and the audience on this really big emotional journey. Yeah. So I kind of look at the songs like going through emotions and holding people's hands through my personality and like dance ability, and also my dancers and what they want to portray. So I like going from very classical theater, experimental movement to then full on kind of like pop, playful, just cunty fabulousness.
I like that.
Yeah.
Cunty fabulousness.
Yeah.
Do you think about the whole thing when you're making music, or do you think about music first as its own thing, and then you add on layers of like visual, of dance, of lighting, of all these, of performance?
I think I probably start with the track list and then start building the numbers and see how it feels, and then kind of swap it around a bit like once it's more developed.
Or like when you're working on new music.
Oh, okay.
Like, are you thinking, okay, I'm just thinking about how this sounds 100%, and then after it's like done, and you listen to it and you're like, okay, what does this look like now?
No,
you know what I mean?
No, I make a song and then often I get a visual straight away, or I feel like I want to move in a certain way. So I'll take my demo home and I kind of will listen to the demo and like do like weird little movements to it, and that's how I know the song should be heard in the world. It's not really just about music for me, it's about the whole world and how it makes people feel. And I like to sometimes like highlight one bit in the song with a visual that isn't the expected thing, if you know what I mean, because you're saying, okay, the song sounds like this, but actually this is how I mean it to feel. So an example of that would be Ache, like one of my first songs I released, and I had a crumping in slow motion. So it's like this really feminine, love, achingly raw expression, but then it has this amazing, powerful dancer crumping with a mask on in slow motion. So you kind of put the opposite feelings together to create the whole vibe.
Okay, let's see if we have any other songs here.
Steve Reich. I want to say this is music for 18 instruments, right?
That within 2 seconds of the song coming on. What is that?
That's an incredible piece of music. It is so cathartic. You hear it's probably around 80 minutes, 90 minutes, if I'm guessing. And if you can find an opportunity to sit down in a concert hall or a theater or whatever and experience that, it is like you go on a journey and you feel lighter at the end of it. It's I've choreographed to Steve Reich once, and he actually came to the premiere, and I got to interact with him a little bit, which was very cool. He actually gifted me a CD of that piece of music, and I still have it in my office. There's a little Post-it note on it that says, I'd love for you to choreograph this one day. And it's sitting on my top shelf of my bookcase right now.
Okay, one more.
Okay, let's do it. Is this Bryce Dessner? No. Oh, Dan Deacon. What's the name of this one?
When I Was Done Dying.
Yeah, okay. Dan Deacon. I've worked with Dan Deacon a few times. I love working with Dan Deacon.
You've worked with a very interesting array of musicians.
Yeah.
Not just classical musicians.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I think dance music is not limited to classical.
That's a stereotype, if anything.
Yeah, I think so. And it's sort of like I get to push that kind of like mantra through my work. And so, Dan Deacon, which I was really nervous the first time I worked with his music, I was just like, I don't know what the audience here is going to think of this, but it was at the time where I had my residency at New York City Ballet, and I was like, okay, it's time to like take a few risks. And so I choreographed to his album America, and he has this like instrumental suite called USA, and it's very abrasive, energetic. It's a combo of acoustic and electronic instrumentation, and I always felt like it reminded me of train travel, like as you're passing through the country, and the setting is changing slowly. And so all the transitions in that dance are designed that way, where it's like something ends and it sort of fades away, and then the next thing's like starting, and it's never so abrupt. But yeah, that's a dance that includes all kinds of different dance inspiration in it. It even has tap dance in it. It has certain like breakdancing techniques. It has a sort of a balletic backbone, but then expands in all these different directions. Yeah.
I love the idea of you sort of imagining, oh, this is like a train going by, and then you have to interpret that same feeling and emotion into a dance.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the way that it goes back and forth between the two is fascinating.
Yeah. I love it because it's like, it's something, and there's challenges with it, right? Yeah. And you're like, okay, how do I figure it? It's like going back to like, we're in a box, but like, if this feels like a train, how do we create that illusion for the audience as they're like experiencing it? So yeah.
What's happening? What's next?
What's next? I have a new dance premiering here at New York City Ballet, January 29th. It's actually set to the first movement of the third Beethoven symphony, which is the Heroic Symphony. And it's slightly provocative, playfully provocative, I'll say, because I'll give you a little history. So George Balanchine, the company founder here, was always known for saying like, you don't choreograph Beethoven. Like, it is untouchable. It's perfect. It should only be experienced in the concert hall. There's nothing to add to it through dance. It's sort of like someone saying like, don't push the button. Like, you want to push the button. You want to push the button. And so it's like, it's meant to be like this like slight provocation of that thought, and to see just like what happens if we go into a process exploring this like major Beethoven piece of music and it could crash and burn, or it could become something really cool. We don't know. But the whole point is to try and to see what happens. And I think that's in the spirit of the residency here.
So what do you do between now and January 29th? Like, how far along?
I'm close to a first draft of the dance. And I'll probably finish that draft this week. Then I'll make sure I record it. And then I'll take a break for the holidays and try to not think about it for at least a week. And then I will start to study the video and create a whole list of revisions, and then come back in at the top of the new year and spend time reshaping it and tweaking the choreography. And then there's always the next stage is the process of zooming out. So then I work with a lighting designer to design the look of it. I'm working with costume designers. I work closely with the conductor and the orchestra to just like bring all the pieces together for the opening night. So I'm excited. Yeah.
Well, we're going to come back.
Come see it. Come check it out. Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Great to meet you.
Likewise.
So awesome.
Happy to do it. Thanks.
The Trackstar Podcast is a presentation of Public Opinion created by me, Jack Coyne, Kieran Coyne, and Henry Cornaros. Written and produced by Noah John. Edited and produced by Haley Sobel. Theme and original composition by Kieran Coyne. Mixing by Devin Klein. Our agent is Joanna Orland at UTA. Thanks for listening. See you next Wednesday.